So you thought I wasn't going to do a review of Apiary, did you? Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple. This is a YouTube channel about board games where I give reviews, top 10s and my honest opinions, regardless of the consequences. We'll get on with the show in just a minute, but first a quick word from my sponsor. As a fellow gamer, you'll understand this is unacceptable. The solution? Head down to my new sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk. KIENDA stocks many of the hot new releases as well as some old hidden gems. Free delivery on orders over £30, further discounts on bulk purchases, and even 5% of your spending refunded back to you as points to be used for further discounts down the line. If you use the referral link in the description below and sign up for a new account, you'll get 5% discount on your first order over £60. So let's make gaps in your collection a thing of the past. Get down to KIENDA and start saving today. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the video.
Get on with it.
So you thought I wasn't going to do a review of Apiary, did you? Well, I might have told a little bit of a tiny sweet white lie about that one because I didn't grab this at Essen because frankly the concept of paying €90 for this at Essen was just downright obscene. I cannot believe people queued up to pay that kind of price for this when it sells for $50 on their website. But the main thing with this was that I was able to play someone else's copy and kind of borrow it and just basically have some fun with it in the time of October. And then recently Asmodee kindly sent a review copy out for this, and so I can actually do a proper honest review for this. Now, oh my word, is this getting, and I hate to use the stupid pun, buzz, because a lot of people are talking about this game, and there are definitely mixed opinions. Some people do not like this game, and some people think it's one of the best games of the year. I certainly have my thoughts on this. Now, going back to Stonemaier games in general, I remember the heights of Stonemaier, which was things like Scythe and Viticulture and Wingspan, you know, those games, just like brilliant games from Stonemaier that I still have on my shelf to this day. But then with things like Pendulum and Tapestry and Charterstone, things have been going a little bit downhill for them lately, and it's like I've not been into their games and I've been noticing lots of issues like balance and, you know, like some design flaws and that, and it's just they've really not been quite at the height as they used to be for me. I'm hoping that they can turn it around and give me a game that really makes me go, right, this is like Stonemaier, like I remember Stonemaier. Will Apiary be the one? Well, let's see. Apiary is a worker placement game where you are seeking to, of course, get the most victory points. But in doing so, you are essentially trying to gather resources. You're using those resources to play tiles into your hive, which either get you bonuses or in-game scoring or special abilities or maybe more income. And you're also planting cards, which can enable you to trigger off special abilities, but also potentially score more end-game points. But the way it works with the worker placement is that you have spaces where you can go and you have these bees, which are these cool sort of, you know, plastic molded bee like dice ships in a sense. And the idea with these is that these are numbered 1 to 4, and so when you place them on the spot, their number dictates how powerful the action is that you do. But particularly if it's at level 4, it does an even more powerful action when you go there. Now, when you have the bees on the spots, they can be pushed off by other players. You don't block in this game. But when your bee gets pushed off, it goes back to your hive and levels up to the next level. And the idea is that you can also retrieve your workers voluntarily, which also bumps them up to the next level rating. But once your bee gets past level 4, it effectively hibernates, which some bees do hibernate, not all of them, most of them don't, but there are 1 or 2 species of bee that do. And the idea is that once it hibernates, you get to trigger some more end-game points and, you know, some little bonuses, but the idea is that the bee is now no longer in your hive. So you now have to go get that bee back. So you're constantly circulating these 4 worker bees in order to, you know, go to the locations, trigger what you need, and get what you need. But it's about micromanaging what levels of bees you've got, when you have them, how many you have, as well as all that. There are other little actions as well, like creating your own little conversion action for one of the locations that can reward you with some points and then ease your way to get the high level resources. There's a Queen's Favour track at the bottom of the board, which enables you to get points by leveling as far up as you can on it. And of course you have the rest of the cards and endgame tiles that you're striving for in the first place. Players will continue leveling up their bees and triggering the locations, gathering the resources and building up their hive until eventually the hibernation comb at the bottom of the board is used up with all the hibernated level 4 bees, at which point the endgame is triggered, you look at the endgame scoring, and of course... When it comes to worker placement, we've seen them all before, it's the dime a dozen for the genre. However, a couple of games do spring to mind with the whole concept of these bees that level up, i.e. leveling up workers. One is Teotihuacan. It comes from Board and Dice, and this is a game that's not talked about much anymore, but in that one you used dice in order to do your actions around the side of the board. But as you did the actions, the dice leveled up in value until they effectively ascended and, went away and you had to start off from the bottom. That's not exactly too dissimilar from this, except this tends to happen a little bit quicker than it does in that game. The other one that does come to mind, more on a slightly distant level, is Euphoria, which is actually a Stonemaier early release. And this one, I mean, the game's fine. I don't mind it, I don't love it. I like it, don't love it. But that one had dice that you didn't necessarily level them up as you went, but you rolled them and the values matter, because if your values on the dice were too high, it triggered something bad for you. So that's a little bit more to a lesser extent, but both of those games have had these deals where the workers are dice or numbered in some way, and that number actually matters. So we'll start with the production values, and even though €90 was a massive rip-off for Essen, I know why they did it. It was all the freight shipping and stuff like that, but still, €90, you had to be desperate. But for $50, £50, it's actually not bad value for your money, especially from production side of things. You get a lot of variety in terms of the tiles, your starting factions, your starting mats, but then you've also got a lot of these chunky tiles with, half-decent artwork, and on there, you've got these very cool plastic, bee ships. I think these are probably the highlight, where they do look a bit like sort of miniature space bees, except they look like they've been shoved into square coffins or something. It's kind of weird, but they've got the clear numbers on there. They've been ink shaded so that you can see the numbers clearly, so it's not too difficult to spot them. You've got wooden resources, and on top of that, you've even got really good reference cards for each player with all the iconography and a good on your turn, end of the turn, during game points. A lot of useful information. Finally, somebody's actually doing these things. But of course, you even get a pretty sweet insert. I mean, the insert there with some baggies for the resources, you have to kind of stuff them in a little bit to fit them, but otherwise everything else kind of fits in nicely. I mean, there's a cubby hold for pretty much everything in here. Tiles will sit in here, the hexes will sit in there, the resources can go in there, the hives can sit on top. The insert is pretty well designed, with the one sort of niggling aspect that these conversion tiles, of which you've got about 5 or 6 of them, they don't appear to have a specific home in there. They kind of just sit on top, kind of just loose, which is kind of weird. You've made effort to put in a spot for everything else, but I can't see that you've put in a spot for these. And if there is, great, but at which point maybe put a diagram in your book to actually say how you put the game away or something, if it's that obvious. But all in all, it looks good on the table. The artwork is fine. I like it. I don't love it. It's decent artwork, and the box cover is pretty cool. But during the game, I don't sort of get a huge amount of interest from the art, and the artwork is kind of sparse on these tiles anyway. Most of it is just the color background for what type of tile it is and the information. So really, most of the artwork in this game is on the board, and a lot of the times that's covered up with hexes and other pieces and other tiles and stuff. So the art is decent, it's just not really on show, but production-wise, it's being built not to a budget.
Really spectacular, spared no expense.
The game's also relatively simple to play. I wouldn't call this lightweight. This is still a mid-weight game, but the rules are not complicated. If you've played worker placement games, you've already played most stuff like this before. The idea of, right, I go to this location, I bump your worker off, I get to do the action, and then we carry on. And there's no real, extra complexity there. But the rule books are written pretty well, and it's not difficult to reference rules in them, particularly when you've already got a decent reference aid, and even, I was very pleased to see, a teaching guide, a separate teaching guide, which is kind of like a nice little memory jogger for if you're teaching the game and you already know the rules, but you just got to sort of relay it out to the other players. This I found very useful when I was teaching it to other players. But on top of that, you've got several other books. You've got an appendix for every single thing in the game, so at least you can read up on those. Although I did notice there's a couple of things that are missing on there, which is interesting. But for the most part, you've also got another solo rulebook. I'll talk about that later. And the rulebook is not particularly big. It's got a decent amount of text for what's the size of the book, but also enough pictorial representation so you can see what they're talking about. But really, I found this quite a breeze to learn and play. I dare say you could probably learn this from the box if you were teaching it to other players like I've done with some other games. It really is quite smooth, and it doesn't feel clunky. Now this next one is kind of a mix of good and bad, but the Automna mode is done by Automna Factory, which they tend to use for a lot of their solo modes, and Automna Factory tend to be pretty good in making simple to operate solo modes, but what they tend to flounder on a little bit is making it feel like you're going up a proper opponent. This one has those same characteristics though. It's a very simple AI to operate. You essentially just have a small deck of cards that you flip the top card off. It tells you what actions will happen based on what type of workers are left, whether there's any like enough workers they need to retrieve, or a level 4 worker, or grey or yellow because they use 2 colours. And then the back of the deck basically dictates like tiebreakers and what resource is important, that kind of thing. It's a pretty small deck and it's pretty much entirely random, and there's the problem, because as much as this AI is very simple to operate, and that's the good thing I want to mention, it's also a little bit punishingly hard at times. I mean, if you're playing this on anything harder than, say, the 2nd level difficulty in this, I think there's 4 of them, and expert mode as well, then you're looking to get absolutely trounced by the AI. But the problem is that the AI is random. You have no agency over what it does. It just basically sucks up spaces and puts bees down. It doesn't care about resources. It ignores half the game, and you have no agency over what it does or stopping it.
And I'm the bad guy?
All you can basically decide on is whether you're going to bump one of their workers in order to bump it up in the level to do what you want to do. That's it. Other than that, you can't stop them. They don't really stop you. It's just there in the background. So it doesn't really feel like I'm going up against a multiplayer opponent per se, but then again, for reasons we'll get onto later, it's probably not too far off. But it is simple to operate, and if you want to play this solo, at least you're not going to have to spend very long learning this game with it. In fact, I dare say you could probably learn the game from scratch, as well as the solo mode on top, and it wouldn't actually be that much of a bugbear. The game also does a good job of giving you some good starting setup variety. I mean, I kid you not, this is the starting lot of faction tiles that you can have. You already have 5 of these mats, which I'm kind of surprised there's only 5 in the box. I'm surprised they don't give you a few more. But here, you've got a decent amount of faction tiles, which have different differentiated starting setups for resource storage, but also a special ability, starting worker differences, and they can all be flipped to have some more powerful version of its ability. There's certainly a decent amount of them here. That being said, also you have the tiles which involve like the end of game scoring ones. You've got the ones that give you special abilities as you go through. You know, these are going to come out and you won't see all of them in the game. So there is a decent amount of variety in the box to keep you trying different ways of playing the game. My first bad point is going to link on to the previous good point that I mentioned. Yes, there is a lot of variety in the starting setups and where you can end up, but in terms of strategies, those tend to be a little bit more linear and limited in fashion. Because really, when it comes to the point scoring, there's really 2 things you should be worried about. You should be worried about planted cards, because planted cards give you endgame scoring and they can be quite significant. You should also be entirely pretty much concerned about the honey carve tiles. These also give endgame scoring, except these tend to give you a lot more points than potentially even some of the endgame cards do. So to play this game, you must do some combination of these 2 things. Either focus entirely on the cards, focus entirely on these, or do a combination of both. And honestly, you probably are going to likely do a combination of both, because you are limited in how many of these you can plant, whereas these, you're only limited on space and how much honey you can generate. But these are your bread and butter of your points. There's other things in the game that can score your points, but they're not anywhere near enough. I mean, you can get a few little odds and sod points from a couple of tiles, or maybe like taking the level 4 action here, which you should not do. The advanced level 4 action is completely pointless. But also there's a tiny little bit of area control at the bottom of the board with a hibernation comb, where essentially when you hibernate you take up spots and there's a 1st and 2nd place, but the differential there is so low and so limited that it might as well not even be a factor in the game. You could cut out that element of area control and it would change nothing really in the game. And then you've got the Queen's Favour tracker on the bottom of the board, which is only worth it if you're going to munchkin it all the way to the very end, and even then the amount of effort it takes to do that usually outweighs the points it's giving you compared to simply getting a couple of honey and buying yourself a couple of these tiles now and again. You know, you could spend ages getting your thing to the end of the Queen's track for 25 points, or you could simply gather yourself 2 honey, grab one of these, and it will probably get you half of that by itself, if not more than half. So why am I faffing around with the track, which is boring and not as good as simply just grabbing a really good honey tile?
How dare you! Open his head!
yes, you do have some unique setups, and maybe just a little, like your early game is going to be different from game to game because of the setup tiles, but where you end up and how you score points really isn't that much different from game to game, and I found it getting very samey very quickly. The game also progresses kind of as a very big rinse repeat. The book says 1 to 5 players, 60 to 90 minutes. I would stretch that more to 60 to 120 if you're going to go for this player count. This game can easily suck up 2 hours if you go with the max count of players, and I really strongly don't recommend you play this with 5. Yes, cue the meme.
5 is right out.
Yeah, 5 is too many. I mean, this game has a reasonable amount of downtime when you're waiting for other people to hurry up and take their turn, and because your bees could get bumped off or values change everywhere and tiles can get nicked, then you can't really plan ahead. So you gotta wait for your turn, and then you gotta think, and it just causes the game to drag on a lot. And 60 to 90 minutes is doable, when you do it with 2 or 3 players, and certainly solo should take you no more than about 60 minutes. But the problem is that the game length is kind of half determined by how quickly people hibernate with the level 4 bees. If people do it quickly, then the game will end a bit quicker than it should, or about that 60 to 90 minute time. But if people are taking their time and trying to build up this big hive and do all sorts of stuff like that, the game will just drag and drag and drag. And it kind of gets to the point where it outstays its welcome fairly quickly. I mean, 90 minutes is as long as this game should take. If it takes any longer than that, it's taking too long. And the rinse repeat thing is exasperated by the fact that it has a similar issue with its game arc that I have with games a bit like the original Great Western Trail, Yokohama, and stuff like that, where basically you create an engine, you see your engine through, it's complete, but the game hasn't finished yet. This one has the same problem. You get to a point where you start off, grab a few things and build stuff up. And then you reach a point where you've like, right, I've used all this, I've got my major scoring bits, I've hibernated a few times, I'm now pretty much out of bees because most of them have hibernated or, they're at low levels now. I'm ready to end, and I can't end the game because there's at least 2 or 3 other hibernation spots left, and I have no means to accelerate the end of the game. So a lot of the times you reach a point, you reach that peak, and then you're just going through the motions, just trying to find something to do that's reasonably meaningful until somebody triggers the end of the game. That always becomes a pain, particularly when you know the game's already gone beyond 90 minutes. Even in solo mode, it can be a problem. Like, I've achieved my solo puzzle. Oh, the game's not going to end for a bit. Well, okay, I'll flip a card. Still not hibernating, alright, fine, guess I'll go explore for a few more resources. What else can I get? Well, I can get that, that's worth a couple of points maybe. Like, you've already exhausted everything you can do for the big points, and you still gotta keep going. Just end.
I hate endings.
As a sideline to the rinse repeat problem, the locations themselves are also very limited in what you can do. You have got several locations on the board and you think, okay, there's a good variety of places to go, until you realize that you're pretty much going to the same 3 on a regular basis and the others are just ad hoc. Not often do you have to go to the conversion place, because you're only going there if you really want to make honey, because that's the main reason you go there. You're not going there to turn a caterpillar into a water. You can get those by exploring easily. So you're probably going there to get honey, because honey is the harder resource. Great. You don't need to do that a lot. A few times in the game you go there as an efficient grab honey and that's it. The rest of the time you just leave that spot alone. The grow spot where you can get more workers, or the frames, if you're not growing for frames, that's useless to you, and you only need to grab more workers when you've used up the workers you've got, so you're only going to go there every now and again. So really, and even the carved tile with the honey tiles, you only go there when you need the honey tile, and you might grab 2 of them in the game. 2, 3 of you are incredibly lucky with the honey, but mostly you'll probably grab 1 or 2. So that's not even a common thing, and you need a level 4 bee to do it anyway. So really, you're pretty much for the game spamming explore, advance, and research. Explore, advance, research. Explore, advance, research. Explore, advance, research.
Oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
Sometimes you might even not even do that much research. You might just literally be going back and forth between explore, advance, explore, advance, explore, advance, and it just constantly rinse, repeat. And these actions aren't exactly the most exciting of actions. I mean, come on. You grab a tile and it goes on your board and it either gives you an instant bonus or a farm, which isn't that interesting, or the blue tiles that give you some special ability. Okay, they can be cool, but there's a limit to how much that gets exciting. The explore action isn't any fun either. I mean, literally all it is that you move across this grid board here, flip a tile, it tells you whether it gives you another resource, you put another resource on it to basically say what it gains you, so it's literally just gain some resources, and it may have a level 4 ability on it, which sometimes they're cool, sometimes they're not worth a level 4 bee, But that's all the explore action is. There's no, like, real theme to it or any nonsense. All you're doing is just moving this giant fat queen bee along. And from there we go on to the theme. You could make this any theme you wanted. Just because you've made everything into hexes to look like a honeycomb doesn't suddenly mean I'm feeling like I'm controlling a space beehive. Yes, I've got honey as a resource. That could be any resource. These tiles could be anything. The queen bee mothership, really? I mean, that's what we're going for? You will have already forgotten this game is really about bees by the time you play it. I mean, you look at the workers and they don't exactly look like bees from the get-go. So it's, you know, it's not like you're looking at those and going, oh yeah, here's my little buzzy bee, bzzz, you know, doing all this. So really, if it didn't have honey as a resource and it wasn't hexes, which let's face it is a staple in Euro games anyway, you'll quickly forget that this thing is about space bees. This could have just been any abstract theme and it would have still worked. So I struggled to get immersed in it from that extent other than quoting Futurama jokes.
I'm sick of shaking my booty for these fat jerks.
It also wouldn't be a Stonemaier game if I didn't mention the word balance. Yes, I don't normally like to talk about balance in games, but Stonemaier has a bit of a reputation for kind of ignoring that word as in the dictionary. I mean, tapestry, enough said.
Oh God, you're killing me!
But when you actually look at some of these tiles and cards, there's a clear differentiation as to which ones are better than others. I mean, you could get yourself 1 point per farm. Great. You could also get yourself 3 points per frame, up to 12. Getting a frame simply requires you to go to a spot, pay 2 resources and get it. You don't even have to fill it up. And if you do fill it up, they get you 8 more points. So I mean, frames are pretty good. But yeah, you could literally just gather some resources during a game. Any resources you feel like, go to the frame thing, get 4 of these, and it's worth 12 points. Little to no effort. Or you could try and get 12 points worth of farms. That involves you having to get 12 green tiles. Good luck with that in the game, especially when you have nothing else to show for it. So that card doesn't feel, you know, balanced on that front. And then other ones like 5 points if your hive mat is full. Filling your hive mat is not difficult, and it's a five measly points, and it takes up one of your 4 crucial slots. And I say 4 if you get 2 extra frames. If you don't get any extra frames for your hive mat, there's only 2 spots for you to plant these cards. And you're going to waste one of them on a 5-point card when there's one here that I've just said gets you 12?
Throw yourself in next time and rid us of your stupidity.
Balance also stems off with these location actions for the level 4B. Level 4Bs aren't something you're going to see a lot of in the game, so you need to use these wisely. So would you use it for a honeycomb tile that gets you 12 points? Would you use it for a planted card that gets you somewhere between 6 to 12 points? Or are you going to waste it on an action that gets you 3? Or are you going to waste it on an explore action that might just get you an extra little sub-action while you do it? Or are you going to waste it making one of these dances, which I swear is one of the most useless things in the game that there is. This idea that you can go to this conversion spot, do a dance, which essentially lets you create this new X to Y conversion thing of your choice using whatever resources you like to create honey, and or to create whatever the end result is. Could be victory points, could be honey, whatever. But you might think, well, yeah, that's great. Yeah, but everybody else gets to use this as well. And all you get is a tiny bump on the Queen's favour track for it. It's not enough. I mean, I am literally giving everybody else in the game something really cool to use, and all I'm getting is the occasional bump on a tiny track that won't even give me enough victory points to be worth anything unless you spam it like crazy. So most games, in fact, if not all games I've played of this, anybody who makes one of these is just wasting their time. Nobody has been able to make these work for what they want to do, and so I'm not going to waste a level 4B on it. It's just going to sit there in that location, and most people aren't going to visit it that often. And even the honey tiles, I wouldn't even call that balanced in themselves. I mean, I've got a few here that I've seen, and here's some examples of what you've got, right? 3 points per wax, okay? Wax is something that you can kind of store, but you're not going to have that much wax on your table. But yeah, you might get 9 points by the end of the game for that, I'd say. Okay, fair enough. All right, let's see this. 3 points per honey tile. You're not going to get a lot of honey tiles. They cost the hardest resource to get, and they are, you know, sought after, and there's not that many in the game. So you're probably going to get maybe 9 to 12 points out of these. 3 per placed hibernation pod. I don't know, you might be able to get 12 out of that. Okay, fine. So you're talking like 12 points here. Now, they take a bit of effort to do with those ones. Let's have a look at some of these other ones. 14 points if you have no frames. So if you literally just stay on your base mat, you can, for no effort, just get 14 points. Okay. All right. 15 points if at least one of each of the other tiles is adjacent. That is not difficult to do on your map because, frankly, it's not that difficult to position things on your hive map. 4 points per frame, max 16. Remember the card I mentioned that said 3 points per frame up to 12? You get that in combination with this. All you gotta do is spend 8 resources in the game, buy 4 frames, you don't even have to fill them up, and the amount of points you get from these easy to acquire tiles is ridiculous. I mean, come on. And then we have the retinue. Oh, have I seen this appear on Board Game Geek a few times and on pages. 1 victory point per space in the Queen Favor track. This means that you could potentially get another 25 points from this tile alone. 25 points for the Queen's Favor, 25 points for this. No other tile in the game can reward you with as many points as this tile does. Honestly, if you are able to get to the end of the Queen's Favor track and you grab this tile, you pretty much have won the game. It's that broken. And there's just easily a divergence in the tiles, and I don't know why they can't seem to get this sort of stuff right.
We're sorry.
So Apiary is fine. I mean, I don't think it's all that, and I think that this is probably one of the better Stonemaier games in recent years, but that's not exactly a high benchmark, given that I gave Expeditions a 5 and gave Pendulum a 4, and Charterstone would probably be a 5 if not a 4 as well. You know, these aren't exactly, benchmarks to be proud of here, but this one is okay, it does the job. I really don't get though where the 9s and 10s are coming from here, where people are trying to claim that this is the best game of the year. There's nothing new in here. We've seen this before. We've had the bumping workers before. It's cool, but we've seen it. The worker placement is nothing new, and even then you're just rinse repeating the same stuff all the time. 2 or 3 locations over and over again. And all that will change from game to game is your starting faction tile and early game will feel different, but then eventually medium and late game, you're going to be doing mostly the same stuff you've done before. So it just feels quite repetitive. And even then, I'm going to be gunning for the same sort of stuff each game because I know from experience that gets you more points than doing half of the other stuff. Things like this just make this a okay game at best, nothing amazing, but it is smooth. It looks nice, it's produced well. If you get it at a normal price and not that stupid €90 price, you've got yourself a half decent deal here, and it's midweight, it's pretty smooth, you can play it solo. If you don't mind that the AI is kind of whatever, it just does its own thing, at least you can play a relatively quick game of this solo because it doesn't take a huge amount of time to set up and get things going, particularly as the insert helps on that front. So there are good qualities here. It's fine. I could be convinced to play it every now and again, but it's not one I want to keep. And honestly, it pales to the early days of Stonemaier, and there are far better games that have come out this year. I'm not getting the undying love for this game. I just don't get. I mean, have you played a lot of other worker placements? I mean, go play some of the Garfield game stuff that do much more unique stuff with worker placements. But this is what you've seen before. It's just pasted a space theme on and just forces you to go through the motions a lot until the point where you want it to end, and it won't end. So it's a little bit inconsistent from game to game. You sometimes get a good game, you sometimes get a boring game. You get a game where the stars align with your strategy, and you get another game where just randomness sort of gets in the way because you don't have enough agency over these bees. It's just like, it's fine. It's okay. I would certainly play this over Expeditions. I think Expeditions was worse. That one drags on way too long, has worse balance issues, but this one is fine. It's another worker placement game. I have a feeling that I'll be forgetting this one fairly soon. I don't know if anybody else will. I think this is still going to be talked about after a while, but yeah, I just don't really, pun intended, get the buzz for it. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the site. Don't forget to check out the rest of the content. I have been putting out reviews like crazy. There's been loads lately, including the big Age of Innovation, the Terra Mystica remake, and also coming up soon will be the Ticket to Ride Legacy spoiler and non-spoiler reviews. That's coming up very soon because I have now finished all 12 games of that, and boy, do I have some thoughts on that one. Until next time, remember, regardless of how fat your Queen Bee mothership is, it's still only a game, so bye for now.